Hello everyone, my name is Claire Montgomery and welcome to my virtual IS presentation. I am an English major and for my IS I wrote a young adult fantasy novella called Witch's Luck. So first I'm going to talk about the premise of my novella and then I'm going to explain some of the ideas I wanted to convey while I was writing it. My project takes place in a world called Oblik, where witches, wizards, humans, and other magical creatures like centaurs and elves live. Maud is my main character, and she's a 15-year-old witch, and she decides to venture outside of her witch community where she grew up and go to the capital city, which is called Dalnes. However, in Dalnes, it's illegal to practice magic as a woman and dangerous. This is a world where witches are feared, but wizards are revered. They are the top tier level of society. They hold places in government and in the highest social positions in the university. And also, to top it off, women aren't allowed any representation at all in the government. They don't get to participate, they don't get to vote, they don't get anything. Only human men and wizards are allowed to participate in organized government. So when Maud goes to Dalnes, she has to disguise herself. She's acting like she's a human. And while she's there, she kind of runs into a group, an organized women's social movement that is campaigning against and trying to work to allow for women to be represented in government. Maud therefore has to navigate her participation in this group with the knowledge that the group condemns witches and that they're not going to be any happier about her identity even though she's been helping them if she gets caught out as a witch. Moreover, she has to reckon with this idea that the group also doesn't care to fight for the rights of other magical creatures like centaurs who also do not have representation in the government. So if that sounds interesting to you, and if you would like to read some of my work, I will be putting a bit of my third chapter that you can look over on my project page. I chose the third chapter because that's when Maud first goes to Dalnes, and we see her meet Carius, the centaur, who becomes a really major character in the novella as the time goes on. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my ideas behind the project. So going into IS in August, I was really only certain of two things. The first was that I would be writing some sort of creative project. The second is I would be utilizing magic and other fantasy elements. This seemed like a perfectly natural decision to me because the genre that I like to read the most is young adult fantasy. So it became something that was fun for me and exciting, and it was something that I've been wanting to do for a while. So it was just the icing on the cake that I got to do it for my IS. So I'm really grateful that I got to do that because I also probably would have been doing it in my free time, and this time I was able to fulfill some of the requirements of Wooster and have fun while doing so. Moreover, within the genre of YA fantasy, the authors that I love the most have usually used the genre as a mechanism in which to explore social norms and challenge those social norms. And so I was interested in doing something similar. And so therefore I had to decide which lens I wanted to look at. And I decided the idea that I was going to explore was gender equality and women's rights. I was influenced by contemporary social issues that are being discussed right now, specifically regarding women in politics. For instance, there's the huge gender gap in politics in which there's a huge disparity between the number of women in government versus the number of men. So I was interested in that. I was also interested in the rhetoric around reproductive rights embraced by male conservative politicians. So I wanted to focus on this idea that there are male politicians who want to make decisions for female bodies without including those women in those decisions. I wasn't going to use reproductive rights as the focus of my novella, but just the idea of males representing females inadequately in positions of power was something that I was interested in. And then also those males not really understanding why this might be problematic or an issue. So this was still very at the beginning of the IS process for me, and right around then when I was still exploring all my ideas, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and it became obvious in this conversation very quickly that he did not believe or understand in institutionalized sexism. So we had this long conversation, and there was a lot of back and forth, and I was ultimately able to sort of solidify my own ideas through talking with him. And I used this as a way to influence my writing. And so I knew I wanted to create characters or situations where there were misunderstandings of the role that patriarchy takes in women's lives. Another thing that I was very interested in doing was using social movements as a mechanism for change rather than war or violence, which is what you most often see in fantasy novels. Usually there's bad guy defeat, there's some social thing that the authors are trying to challenge, and this is from novels such as Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and at the very end, the culmination of such novels, there is a war or some kind of violent uprising that happens, and then the social change occurs because of the violent uprising. However, I didn't think that was very realistic because I was basing my IS on contemporary issues, and personally, I do not see the United States as breaking out into a civil war over women's rights. It's more realistic to have a slow but steady change that is done through social movements, the kind of change that is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And it also allows for a whole lot more nuance and complication that I was interested in. I wanted to dive into those gray zones where not everything is one way or the other. So ultimately, in my IS, I ended up with 8 chapters and a critical introduction. I found the process to be extremely rewarding, and I'm really proud of what I produced. So I really hope that you enjoyed this presentation and that you'll stick around and ask questions while I'm online during the virtual symposium, and thank you for watching.